Hi, everyone. Welcome to CareLab.
Welcome to CareLab. I'm so excited today. One, it's Friday, so I'm always excited. But two, we have an awesome guest because we have Sam here, and Sam Porritt is coming to us from the Falling Forward Foundation.
Yep.
So Sam earned an MBA at the University of Chicago and then spent many years marketing some of America's biggest brands like Cheetos and Betty Crocker and Clorox and Helene Curtis hair care. But in 2011, his life changed dramatically when he and his wife were on vacation in Italy, and Sam suffered a spinal cord injury and was initially paralyzed and would go through many, many months of rehab. And after his recovery, he launched the nonprofit Falling Forward in 2013. And so he's been working to help people recover from catastrophic injuries ever since. And so we're really happy to have you on the podcast to talk about your story, talk about Falling Forward Foundation. Of course, selfishly, we love for you to talk about the importance of rehab, since that's what we do. But Sam, thank you so much for being on.
Hey, it's wonderful to be with you. Thanks so much for this opportunity. Yeah, I'm really delighted to talk with both of you, and I know we're going to be talking about a topic that not many people in the outside world know about. I didn't know anything about it until, as you said, I had my spinal cord injury. And I know your podcast reaches a lot of people, and through this podcast-thon is going to reach a lot of people. So I'm excited to help spread awareness about this issue that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really wonderful and important episode to listen to. Also, as Sam just mentioned, this is a special episode tied in with a movement called Podcast-thon. It's Podcast-thon, not Podcast-a-thon. Don't know why, but that's what it is. But it's all about highlighting different charities and different great work that's going on out there. So if you definitely, after you listen to this episode, go check out some of the other episodes that might be and podcasts that might be associated with Podcast-thon and hear about some of the wonderful work that's being done out there. Because I think we all need to hear about some of the good things that people are doing, because humans are capable of actually doing a lot of good stuff too, if we all work together. Before we get into talking about the really, really important work that you do, Sam, though, we have to do something that is distinctly less important, which is go through our icebreaker question that we force all of our guests to do just as a way to kickstart things. So, and this is an easy one today. I am wondering, because it's the spring here, or hopefully wherever people are maybe starting to feel a little spring-ish. What is your favorite springtime tradition?
Oh, tradition. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Or not even, it don't have to think about that, but what's your favorite thing about spring? What do you like to do?
So when you said the word spring, the first thing that popped into my head is birds. And what really triggers spring for me is hearing birds chirping. They're almost silent during the winter, and then suddenly in the springtime, they make so much noise, and they're happy, right? And they're singing. And I've noticed that actually the past few days, right? We'll be out walking our dogs, and it's like, wow, there's so much noise, right? The birds up in the trees and making noise. So yeah, that's what I associate with spring, is the sound of, and I think it's joy of birds, right?
Yeah,
that's lovely.
That's a good classic one for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it feel like there's life happening.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not so silent and dead in the outside.
Yeah.
Mine is, if you want to know what's going on in my brain and what's happening on my Instagram feed, it's gardening. So I'm thinking about all my plans for what I'm planting, where we're planting it at, how I'm just psyching myself up for all the energy I'm going to put into it and how much time I'm going to put into it. So my garden can be a lot better than it was last year.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah. And don't you love kind of the smell of dirt in the spring too? That's one of my favorite things. Is that weird?
I'm not going to say it's weird, because to each their own, but I'm also not going to agree.
That's really funny. Okay, so I love the spring and just the feel of the air outside as it just changes into that spring weather, I think is one of the most delightful things. For my family, though, specifically, this is my family's favorite thing, and I love it because they love it. And it's
But you
fun because
secretly
they
don't
have
like it.
No, it's not that I don't like it. It's just like it is not personally my favorite thing, but it's really fun because they love it so much. You know, it's kind of like that. I wouldn't go on my own, but I love going with them. Does that make sense? Huh?
Sure. You don't like it, but you do it because
I
your
do.
family loves it.
No,
It's the
no, I
definition
do.
of it. But okay, but tell us about it. Tell us about
I'm
it.
curious
Okay.
what it is. Yeah.
So there's a big Renaissance fair in North Texas that happens for like a month, or maybe, I don't know, it's a long time, like a month or 2 months in the spring. And like every year, all my boys, because I've, you know, got a husband and 2 boys, so all my boys, their love of it grows. So it started off where like we would just go like once, and that was our Scarborough Fair Day, and then was like, we're gonna go twice, and it's like, oh, we went twice this year. And now, starting last year, we had season tickets, folks.
Come on.
And I cannot tell you, I don't actually always go, you know, but they'll go on their own. And that to me, like, I know it's really spring and we're like rolling in the year when we're at the Renaissance Fair. Yeah. As weird as that is.
That's cool because I like traditions, you know, and grew into a tradition. So that's cool.
Yeah.
So, Sam, will you start off by telling us the story about how you acquired your spinal cord injury and how, you know, that changed your whole life?
Sure. So, you know, I think as with any catastrophic injury, most people have no experience with it, right? And that was true of me, right? I had a successful career and a good life, and you know, everything was just kind of going along normal, if you will. And my wife and I were on vacation in Italy, so you know, we like to travel, and we're on this incredible vacation to Italy, and I'm taking a photograph with my phone and I'm not paying attention to where my feet are, and suddenly I fall off a 15-foot wall, right? So like life changed literally in the blink of an eye. At one moment, this dream vacation in Tuscany, and the next moment, I'm laying on the ground and I can't feel anything from my belly button down. And I remember the thoughts in my head, even at that moment. Like, first of all, I didn't understand, right? I really didn't understand what had happened to me. I was a little dazed and confused, but also I didn't understand what a spinal cord injury really was, right? And feeling, you know, I'm like touching my body, my stomach and my legs and everything with my hands, and I'm really not, it's not completely computing as to why I'm not feeling, you know, my extremities. So anyway, long story short, that's how the accident happened, right? I could have been on a ladder cleaning the gutters of our house. You know, I could have been, you know, doing many quote unquote normal things, but mine happened on this beautiful vacation to Italy. So now, long story short, Italian EMTs came and they flew me out in a helicopter and flew me to a hospital, and same day I had emergency surgery, and it turned out to be a 9-hour surgery. And I was in ICU then for like 3 days and ended up being in the Italian hospital for 2.5 weeks before I was stable enough to fly home to the US. And then I went into a US hospital in Kansas City for another 6 weeks. And the journey began, right? The journey of recovery. But you know, the injury happened in the blink of an eye, like so many things do, right? If somebody slips and falls in their bathroom, or a car accident, or stroke, or whatever it is. So
I mean, thank you for sharing your story with us, by the way.
Yeah.
I think it's so hard for so many people to kind of wrap their brains around the fact that, as you said, like literally in the blink of an eye, their life can change, and what the impacts of that are going to be. I think we kind of all go through the world to a certain extent feeling like, oh, I'm careful, nothing's going to happen to me, things are going to progress on this path forward, and sort of like assuming that we can control everything and that change isn't going to happen. And I think it's just a really powerful example of, you know, why we need to be thinking about things like being inclusive and understanding that life won't always look the same for folks. I am interested. So you were in rehab probably. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt you, but I
No,
want to
no, go
touch on a
ahead.
word. I want to touch on a word that you just mentioned because you said control, right? That
Mm,
we all feel like we're in control. And that was very much me, right? Like I was the guy that was in control, whether it be in my corporate job or in my personal life or whatever. Like I felt in control. Any challenge that came my way, I could handle it. I had the answer. If something was needed to be fixed, I could figure out the answer. And literally, when my injury happened to me, it's the first time in my life that I had zero control, right? From the moment I hit the ground, I had zero control. When the EMTs showed up, I remember just laying there and like looking up at them from the ground and thinking to myself, there's nothing I can do, right? Like whatever they do and whatever, then the surgeon does and whatever the nurses do, everybody along the journey, like they were in complete control and I had zero control. And why I wanted to hit on that is, and I'm so glad you mentioned the word, but it was really hard for me to let go, right? Like to say, I can't do anything. I have no control. I have no knowledge or experience or anything that will, in any way contribute to this. So I just have to like let go and kind of whatever happens, happens. And that's that was a scary feeling, right? To be powerless, right? And that changed, right? Later in my journey, I shifted from being powerless to, I had power again. But wow, early on, really hard.
what made that shift for you from where you felt like you had no control to where you felt like you had some power in
Yeah.
your own life again?
Yeah. I'm not sure there was a moment, right, where the shift happened, but like as an example, when we left Italy, so 2.5 weeks into my journey, when we were departing Italy and headed to the hospital in the US, the surgeon and the people in Italy that had taken care of me, who were amazing. The surgeon was a brilliant surgeon. We were later told he did a perfect, quote unquote, perfect surgery. So I was really lucky, right? Because in a foreign country, who knows what's going to happen to you, right? But when we were leaving Italy, the words that they used were something to the effect of, "We think you have a chance, but we don't know that you'll ever walk again," right?
Mm-hmm.
That's hard to hear, right? We think you have a chance, right? But we don't know, right? So yeah, back to the question of control or power. I didn't feel at that point that I had much control or power, but it started to shift, right? So I get to the U.S. hospital and they do all kinds of exams and tests and images and everything. And eventually they were the ones that said, "Hey, you had a perfect surgery. We wouldn't change anything." And their words then were, "You just need a lot of rehab," right? Like, you don't need any more surgeries. You just need a lot of rehab. And I really didn't understand even what that meant at the time. And fast forward, I went through 2 years of rehab. So,
Mm-hmm.
it was a long journey. But what the therapist then that I started working with, what the therapist immediately said to me was, "We just got to like try everything. We got to work really hard and we need you to work really hard," right? Like, so that was the message that started to come across to me, and that's where I started to realize I do have power, right? And realize, and I think I told one interview this before, like I was a 48-year-old man, and I had this thought in the back of my head, and I hope this is okay that I say this on your podcast, but I had this thought in the back of my head: I don't want the rest of my life to suck, right? And I'm going to do whatever I got to do to make the best of this. I'm going to do whatever I have to do to, whatever the therapists say, right, to make my body better, whatever that is, right? Because I had this attitude, kind of like, I've got one shot at it, right? And I'm going to make the best shot I can. And no matter what that takes, right? Because dot, 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 I don't want the rest of my life to suck, right? So I seized power at that point, or it felt to me like I was seizing power. Like, okay, I gotta like give it my all, right? And I'm gonna work hard, and we're gonna see how this turns out, right? Kind of thing. So shifting from powerless to I'm in control now.
I'm so grateful for you for sharing the level of depth of that, because I think that is a really powerful thing to understand as a therapist who's working with people, and then also as like family and other friends who are helping somebody who might be dealing with this, because you also could have decided at that moment that you weren't going to do that. That
Mm-hmm.
I am powerless. I can't do this. I can't feel my legs. I don't know why is it me that fell off this wall? And you could have had that decision because you already were in that space, kind of, right? And you could
Right.
have kept going down that rabbit hole.
Right.
And your level of rehabilitation would have been significantly impacted from that, right? I didn't treat you or work with you, but I can confidently say that because I've seen that happen with people. And
I,
so it's so important.
and as you would imagine, I was surrounded in rehab by dozens and dozens of other people who had equally bad stuff happen to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Brain injuries, strokes, other spinal cord injuries, the gamut of everybody had a bad thing happen to them. Everybody was in a bad physical place. But to your point about the mental place, some people did go where you're talking about. Some people
Mm-hmm.
went to the place, I called it the dark side actually, of, you know, they were angry about what had happened to them. They were depressed about what had happened to them. They felt it was unfair, yada yada yada. And in many ways, they gave up. They said, I don't like this. I don't like rehab. This isn't, something I want to do. And in making that choice, in many ways, they did give up. And versus fighting and saying, I'm going to make the best of this and I'm going to work hard and see how it turns out, they kind of gave up. And I didn't want to be that, right? I
Yeah.
wanted to do all I could to see how good it could be, right?
Yeah.
Versus, yeah, letting go. Yeah.
Hey there, it's Emilia. Listen, I am so thrilled to have a great resource like Ask Sammy as part of the CareLab team, and here's why. It's a game changer for aging in place because it makes it so simple. All you do is ask. Just type in your question or even tell Sammy what the problem is and get tailored solutions. Everything from innovative adaptive equipment to comprehensive resources. It's a great way to become more empowered, to live more independently, and to live with greater confidence. And my favorite thing about how Ask Sammy works is it's deeply rooted in dignity and practicality. So whether you're a fellow therapist, a care partner, or someone who's seeking solutions for themselves, visit www.asksammy.com. We're going to link it in the show notes so you can find it there. Start making home more accessible today. Now, back to the show.
And also the other thing about that is like, kind of, is your right actually to feel that way, because it does suck that this thing happened. But the way our healthcare system is set up, you mentioned this before, like this is my one shot. And it kind of is, right? I don't think that's fair, because maybe we should make it so that if you do have, let's say, a spinal cord injury, for example, you need time, your body needs time to heal anyway. Maybe you don't go to rehab right away. And when you're mentally ready for it and you can put the effort into it, then you get to go back. But that's just not how the thing works very well. You have to really work hard to make that happen. And so it is kind of like your one shot. And so for everybody who's around that person, if you're engaging with a person from whatever aspect you are in, whatever you can do to be helpful and encouraging and help them flip that switch so they can engage, it's worth it, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. Yep.
I want to take a second and just like hammer this home a little bit more one more time here. I would say that obviously we can't fix everything and we can't change everything. And we don't have ultimate control always over how much a body or a brain is going to heal and recover.
Sure.
But the one thing that we do have control over is how hard we work at it. And the number one determinant of every outcome I have ever seen has been the willpower and the effort and the belief that we have the ability to make a change that makes the difference. And that doesn't come from me, the therapist. It doesn't come from the OT. It doesn't come from the PT. It doesn't come from speech. That has to come from the person who is there in the rehab to get better, because it doesn't matter how much we believe if you don't believe. But if you do, then we can make some really, really incredible things happen. And I think that's so powerful because you're absolutely right, Sam. Like, we can't control the things that happen to us, but we can control how we decide to think about it and how much effort we put in. And the number one determinant between good outcomes and bad outcomes I've seen over the entire course of my career is whether or not I walk into that room and that person wants it. You have to want it. And you have to, even though it sucks, and it does suck, and it is hard, and you're not always going to feel good, and sometimes you're going to feel discouraged, but we have to get up and we have to do it again, because that is the only way forward. Like, that is such an important message for people to hear and understand.
Yeah. So I totally agree. But I will say, I do think the therapist plays an important role in motivating, encouraging the patient, right? And not falsely, right? Like, not giving false hope, not setting false expectations, but just encouraging, like, it's worth the effort. I've seen other people, go through this same thing, and the progress that they've made, whatever it may be, right? But when you begin the journey and you know nothing about it, right? And I think I said this to one of you in a prior discussion. Anybody that this happens to, brain injury, spinal cord injury, stroke, whatever, it's like diving into a swimming pool that you've never swam in before, right? Like, the whole experience, you have no idea, right? Like, it's so foreign. Most people have never had major need for medical care. Most people have never had a surgery. Most people have never gone through rehab before. So the whole experience is just like navigating going through a forest with a blindfold on, right? It's just, you don't know what's ahead of you. So the role of the therapist and all the medical professionals, but particularly the therapist, because ultimately people that this happens to, they spend the most time with the therapists, right? The doctors are wonderful. The nurses are wonderful. They each play their roles, but you really end up spending the most time with your therapist, right? I really viewed it like a partnership, right? Like, my therapist and I are partners together in this journey, and I got to trust her, but I also, I have a role, right? That, I have to, be honest with her, and I gotta be very open and candid with her. So it's a partnership. And there were days that I didn't like it, right?
Yeah.
And the therapist,
it's hard.
Had to encourage me or remind me of something that we did last week that was like a new breakthrough, and to help kind of keep me motivated and keep me going, right? It's a partnership, and it's a journey that you're on together.
So tell us a little, you told us how we got to rehab and that you spent 2 years there. And when I first met you and you said 2 years of rehab, I was like, how did you get 2 years of rehab? Because that's not very normal. So talk to us a little bit about that, and then how you came to create Falling Forward.
Yeah, thank you. So that's the issue that I mentioned kind of at the top, that so few people know about, and I didn't know anything about it. And it's an issue called therapy caps, which is in virtually everybody's health insurance policy, almost all policies, there's a limit, a defined limit on how much the insurance company is going to pay, how many sessions they're going to pay for outpatient rehab. And again, I knew nothing about this, but the day that I was being admitted to outpatient rehab, so I'd done the inpatient in Italy, and then the 6 weeks of inpatient in Kansas City Hospital, and then it was time to go to outpatient rehab. And it was the day I was being admitted to outpatient rehab, and they, of course, look at our health insurance policy, like they check everybody's to say, what does your policy say? And the lady's words were, you have a very unique insurance policy. And I didn't like those words because I thought unique and insurance didn't sound good, right? and I said something, just kind of blurted something out of concern. And she's like, oh, no, it's good. And I'm like, how could it be good? And she goes, no, you have no limit on rehab. And my wife and I are like, what do you mean limit on rehab? And so she explained to us, right, that what I said earlier, that virtually all health plans have a defined limit on rehab. And she said, your plan has no limit. You're going to get all the rehab you need. And, I didn't really understand what she was saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
But sure, it sounded positive. Like, okay, like we have a good policy. Okay, great. I later describe it, and I really mean this. When I started to realize what it really meant, it really felt like I'd won the lottery. Like, like money just fell out of the sky, going to pay for my rehab, right? It was a gift, right? It was a completely unexpected gift. We did not buy the insurance policy that we had because it had this unlimited benefit. We didn't know.
You probably never even
you weren't even thinking about it.
No,
Yeah.
You're just like, I have health coverage. Yes.
Yeah.
No one does. No one knows. And so many people's health plan is provided by their employer. So, of course, you don't look at it, right? It's just whatever's in the plan is in the plan kind of thing.
What you get is what you get.
Yep.
What you get is what you get. But I was the lucky one, right? I had this unlimited rehab benefit. So now to your point, right? That's how I got the 2 years of rehab, right? My body slowly recovered. And that's typical of, as you know, it's typical of neurological injuries like brain and spinal cord and stroke, right? It's a long, slow process. My body recovered very slowly. The nerves, like in my legs, recovered slowly. So it's a long, slow process, and mine didn't stop. Mine kept going, and my insurance benefit kept going, and my rehab kept going because of this unusual policy that we had. Meanwhile, I'm going every day to rehab, surrounded by my fellow patients. Again, all people who had equally bad stuff happen to them. They needed rehab every bit as much as I did, but one by one, they were being dismissed, right? One of my fellow patients would say, oh, Friday's my last day. And I'm like, what? What do you mean Friday's your last day? Oh, no, my insurance runs out Friday. I'm done. And that happened, one by one, over and over and over. And I saw what I thought was really, injustice of this, right? Like I get a gift and I keep going and my body keeps getting better, but these other people, they're all being sent home, right? So long story short, and I love to tell the story and drag it out, but long story short, initially I was mad about it. I thought, this is, not fair and it's an injustice and how can this be so screwed up, right? I was mad about it. And then the more kind of time I processed on it, I ultimately got to an epiphany and I'm like, stop being mad about it, do something about it. And the do something about it, to your point, was I decided to start this nonprofit organization that's focused on this issue. It's called Falling Forward. The name, there's a couple kind of meanings in the name, but literally one of them is, it's what happened to me. I fell forward off that 15-foot wall, right? So Falling Forward is all about addressing this issue of the therapy caps, and financially, the money we raise pays for people's rehab. When insurance stops them, the money that comes from our donors pays for people's continued rehab so they can continue to recover. So our mission statement is essentially give people the same chance that I had, right? Give people the chance to recover to their full potential. And those are the words, in our mission statement. Recover to their full potential. And you as therapists, you understand what that means, right? Everyone's full potential is different, right?
Sure. Absolutely.
Every stroke is different. Every brain injury is different. Every spinal cord injury, like mine, is different. My full potential, just so your audience knows, my full potential was I got back virtually everything except my ankles. I have just very little movement or function in my ankles. So I wear braces on both of my ankles to help prevent foot drop, right? That was my full potential. I got virtually everything else back except that, right? I had to, accept that was going to be my best case, right, of wearing these braces and modify my lifestyle accordingly. And the great news is I didn't have to modify too much, right? I can still mow my grass with a push mower. I can still go hiking in the mountains in Colorado using 2 walking sticks, right? I have a high level of functionality for somebody with a spinal cord injury, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But back to the point of full potential, right? And why we use that word in Falling Forward is everybody's full potential is different, right? Everybody's body recovers in different ways and to a different degree. So we believe keep people's rehab going, as long as their body continues to improve, right? And help them reach that full potential. Versus cut them off at this arbitrary limit that the insurance policy says.
Yep.
And that might be 20 visits or 30 visits, as you well know, right? 30 visits is a very typical limit. Well, at 30 visits, I was still in a wheelchair, right?
Yeah. I mean, if we're talking outpatient therapy, that's maybe like you're maybe going, twice a week? It kind of, depends on your frequency, but that's not a super long time. That's not that many visits for something like a spinal cord injury.
I use my example often when I'm speaking, just to kind of put it in black and white for people of, if I had been stopped at 30 visits, which most people are, I'd probably be in a wheelchair the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. And that would be my life, right? And can you live the rest of your life in a wheelchair? Absolutely, right? But I would have had to modify so many things, right, to live my life in a wheelchair versus I got to keep going. Mm-hmm. My body kept healing except for my ankles. I now wear these braces. But as I said, I can mow my grass and go hiking and drive a car and, all the things that I do. So that's the difference, right? Cut people off at the arbitrary limit and they have to live one way versus keep them going in their rehab and they can actually have a higher quality of life. And so Falling Forward, we've now funded over 200 people in their recoveries.
That's amazing.
And now it's not my story anymore. It's 200 plus stories. And our website, we film videos of people to show their journey and, people going back to work and being able to be parents to their children again. And, all the things that, people want to do in their normal lives, with rehab, with continued rehab, these people have reached those outcomes, which is really wonderful. So.
Yeah, that is amazing and like such a blessing. And how far is that reach of your 200 people? Are they all in like the Kansas City area? Have you been reaching out to other places? How can people connect with you all?
Great question. So the way our model works is we work with specific rehab centers. And right now we work with 4 rehab centers. And to your question, they're all kind of in the Midwest. So Denver, Chicago, and the Kansas City metro area are where the 4 rehab centers are today. Later this year, we're going to announce we are going to add 2 more rehab centers elsewhere so we can broaden our geographic reach. Mm-hmm. And that's been really important to us. We're delighted that we're helping people in the Midwest, right? But every day people are having injuries in the Northeast and the South and, all over the country. And so we're going to expand to 2 more rehab centers to help people there. But to your point, it's all about the rehab centers that we partner with. We channel the funds to the rehab centers, and then the rehab centers channel the funds to the patients who will most benefit from additional rehab. And we set it up that way 11 plus years ago, really because we believe people like the 2 of you are the experts, right? You're on the ground at the rehab center in Denver, let's say. You're on the ground, you're working face to face with the patient, and you know that patient needs 10 more visits or 20 more visits or, whatever it is, right? You're working with them day to day. You know what they need to, keep their progress going, to reach their next goal. So we leave those decisions to you, the experts on the ground at the rehab centers. We raise the money, we funnel the money to the rehab centers, and then we let the rehab centers allocate it out. And it's worked beautifully.
CareLab listener, I have a question for you. If someone you love needed a caregiver, what qualities would you want that caregiver to have? You probably want them to be reliable, trustworthy, kind, maybe just a generally dependable and good person, right? Second question, would you also want them to be trained? I'm gonna guess the answer is a definite yes. Okay, third and final question for you. Do you think it matters who gives that training? Like, is it cool if it's just in your body, or would you want that person to be qualified expert? Assuming you do, in fact, love this person who needs a caregiver, you probably want the expert, right? Well, that's what Higher Standards Caregiver Training does. Higher Standards Caregiver Training provides 100% occupational therapist-led training for caregivers. Caregivers get taught everything from gold standard foundational skills for transfers and daily living tasks, all the way up to how to deal with specific diseases and injuries. And most importantly, they are taught all of these things in a way that is practical and enhances the participation of the person who needs the care. And it actually protects the safety of everybody involved. Why? Because everyone deserves a higher standard. For a course, for individuals, or learning about training for care for organizations, find that information at higherstandardscaregivertraining.com.
I just want to say, like, when you said that, like, because of the Falling Forward Foundation, you've helped 200 people get to their maximum potential in rehabilitation. Like, I'm glad that Brandy talked, because I was like feeling emotional at that time, because these aren't just numbers. These are real people
Lives.
with real lives who like, maybe we know, maybe we don't. It could be one of us someday, but it makes such a difference. These aren't small things. We're talking about reclaiming lives here. I will often say, like, it's the doctor's job. It's the doctor's job to save your life. It's my job to give you your life back. Mm-hmm. But if we don't have enough time to do that, then we're falling short on that promise. And I think it's so incredible that you're really doing something that is making it so people can get back to their lives as much as is possible. It's incredible. Thank you for doing what you're doing.
Well, no, thank you for saying that. And, you know, I did a big pivot. I went from corporate worlds to starting a nonprofit. And honestly, I didn't know what I was doing, right? I was entering a space that I had no experience in. But I really believed that this needed to be addressed, right? Mm-hmm. But where I'm going is, in thanking you for your kind compliment, the work I'm now doing, very bluntly, is the most gratifying work I've ever done in my life, right? Like, sure, I can tell you great stories from my corporate days and, you know, things that I did and that I'm proud of, and, you know, ego boost when I tell those stories. But nothing I did back then is like what I'm doing now, which is, as you said, truly changing people's lives. And let me give your audience two examples just to kind of put it in perspective. Sure. And these are out on our website. And if people, I would, you know, love it if people want to get more examples like this. We've got the videos out on the website. But one, as an example, a father named Jason. Jason was out for a bike ride with someone else. And the tire of his bike, you know, hit the tire of the bike in front of him and caused an accident. And Jason went over the handlebars of his bike, and he was wearing a helmet, like people should when they're riding a bike. But still, his head was the first thing to hit the pavement when he went over the handlebars. So he has this horrific brain injury, like horrific, even with a helmet on. He's rushed to the hospital. His wife gets a call, right, from the hospital. And this is, you know, to put it in perspective of things like this happening to real people. His wife is pregnant with their 10th child. And she gets a call that her husband is in the ER and they're not sure he's going to live, right? Mm-hmm. Right? 9 children. She's pregnant with the 10th, and he has this horrific brain injury. Fast forward, Jason literally is fully recovered after rehab and back working his job so he can provide for his family of 10, right?
Yeah.
And help his wife parent 10 children, right?
10 children have a father.
10 children have a father. 10 children have a father that likely maybe he would have lived, like, you know, he did live, but his functional abilities probably would have been poor, right? And he probably never would have gone back to work and maybe not been able to help parent the children. So 10 children have a father because he got the rehab he deserves. Completely different example.
Wait, before you leave him,
Yeah,
Do you
please.
know what his functional status was like when his insurance ran out and when you all started helping?
Yeah.
Yeah, it similar. I mean, he was barely able to walk, barely able to speak. You know, not he had you know real complications with putting thoughts together. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it
Mm-hmm.
just he needed all disciplines, right? OT, speech, PT. He needed everything. He literally had to relearn
Learn
everything.
everything. Yeah,
It,
at that stage, he would have needed a
it,
caregiver, somebody to take care
in
of him.
Yeah,
24/7.
in our video, the video is actually he and his wife being interviewed together, and she had to be in the video because he has no recollection of
Mm-hmm.
much of the early days of the process, right? Because he had this horrific brain injury, and his wife, even in the video, which you'll see, mentioned she's like he was in a diaper, right? My husband was in a diaper, right? He couldn't manage his bowel and bladder for himself, right? She's like, a father of 9 about to have a 10th is in a diaper, right? So, fast forward, he's now a fully functional man, father, back to work, all that. So, real progress happens with continued rehab. Okay, totally different example. A recent one. A 15-year-old girl in Chicago, living inner city in Chicago, standing on a street corner, an out of control car jumps the curb, hits her. We don't know to this day was the driver drunk or high or what, but it was a hit and run. And they have never to this day found the driver, which is sad. But the young girl, her first name is Mari. Mari almost didn't survive the hit and run.
Mm-hmm.
Major internal issues, multiple organs damaged, major internal issues, both legs broken, in really bad shape. Mari needed 11 surgeries.
Mm-hmm.
How many people have had 11 surgeries in their life, right? And she needs 11 surgeries like in the course of a year to repair and go in and repair again all the damage in her body. And as you would imagine, after 11 surgeries, you also need a whole lot of rehab, right?
Yep.
And not a short duration of rehab, right? So now, fast forward, Mari is now a 17-year-old, fully recovered, back in high school, went to her high school homecoming,
Oh.
and went to see her dream. She said during her rehab, she says, I wanted to see Taylor Swift. And last November, she went to the Taylor Swift concert, and we had this amazing photo of Mari at the concert. And her words, she said, I rocked the dress, right?
Yes.
She's a 17-year-old girl, and she wants to, be able to dress like a 17-year-old and go to a concert and dance and sing and rock the dress. And indeed she did, right? But
Mm-hmm.
would not have if she had not gone through a really long course of rehab. Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, recovery is possible.
And-
Therapists know what they're doing, right? The issue is insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to point out, because ultimately what we want this to be about is people's ability to live their lives to the fullest extent possible,
Mm-hmm.
right? What it ends up being about is money, right? So let's frame this in a money context. In both of those examples, let's say falling forward is not there. These two people get discharged from therapy because there's no one to pay for it before they meet that maximum functional potential. Mm-hmm. And so the gentleman goes home. He needs 24-hour care. He's not able to provide for his family. He's then more likely, just from the insurance perspective, he is going to have other complications. He's more likely to develop significant other medical complications that will cost probably hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of his lifetime, not to mention what he's not able to contribute to his family and paying taxes and things like that because he's not able to work. What's the financial cost of that compared with getting all the rehab he needs?
Yeah.
And then let's look at this young girl, her entire life in front of her, her whole life. What is the financial cost of the care that she would have required throughout the duration of her life versus her being able to go out, live her life to the fullest, and be a completely productive member of society? Like,
Yeah.
it's not that hard to frame those costs up. It's
Right.
just not.
Right.
So it is so bonkers to me that we've gotten into this situation where we're so short-sighted for the bottom line right now that we can't see what the bottom line is in the long run, even if we
Yep.
don't
So-
care about people at all. And I
So
think we do care about people.
I'm delighted you bring that up because that makes me pivot just for a minute. So Falling Forward is doing two things. Like any nonprofit, we raise money, right? And I already said the money we raise pays for people's rehab. But the second thing Falling Forward is doing is advocacy, which is to the point you just raised. We don't think a nonprofit organization should have to pay for people's rehab. We think the burden should go back on the insurance companies, right? So the only way to make that happen is advocacy. And so in Washington, we began the advocacy work back in like 2012. And we took patient after patient after patient to Washington to meet with members of Congress and tell their stories. And Jason, the father, who had the bad brain injury, Jason is one of them. Right. Jason went to Washington and told his story. And we talked about just what you said a moment ago of the short term versus the long term costs, right? Jason is healthy today, Senator, right? We're sitting in your office. Jason is healthy today, but if he wasn't, the long-term costs of taking care of Jason would be, huge. And one by one, as we had those conversations with members of Congress, to their credit, they got it. But they got it because I think they met real people, right? Like
Not
Jason.
just numbers.
Not numbers, people.
Not just numbers, right? And they heard their stories. We actually had one member of Congress cry on one of the stories. And when I saw the tears, I'm like, oh, we got her. Like the human story got through, right? They understand that it's not just the numbers, but they did understand the number side of it. They're like, oh, this doesn't make sense, right? Let's avoid those long-term costs, right? So long story short, where I'm going is we actually got change in Medicare. So Congress controls the budget for Medicare. So all those meetings that we had with members of Congress, we were able to get them to change Medicare. And starting in 2018, Medicare since 2018 has not had a hard cap on rehab. That's the good news, right? We have not gotten the insurance companies, the commercial insurance companies, to change yet, right? And it's, I use the word yet, but the question with the insurance companies is really what you brought up earlier. It is a short-term versus a long-term thing, right? Like making profits in the short term, making profits this year versus avoiding the costs for the next 10, 20, 30 years, right? And corporate America has to figure that out, right? Are we better off making profit today, or are we better off avoiding the costs, that are going to happen year after year after year after year? But I think your point is 100% spot on. It is for the insurance companies. It's about the numbers. And if they would look at the long-term versus the short-term costs, I think there's a real argument there.
Well, Sam,
So we will keep fighting.
that's what we need is
Yeah,
keep
we'll
more
Keep
fighting.
fighting the good fight.
And so tell us how others can help you in this fight.
Yeah. So, the biggest thing that most people can do is donate money, right? If they have heard the stories I mentioned earlier and those are of interest and you want to help somebody else like Jason or Mari recover, right? And you can make a donation, that'd be fantastic. And, visit our website. The website is fallingforward.org. And, easy, the donation link is right there on the website, as well as the stories, to hear other people's stories out there. On the advocacy work, that I mentioned a minute ago, if anybody in the audience just happens to have, somebody that we should talk to in the advocacy work, we're all ears, right? If you know somebody at an insurance company that we should talk to, or somebody in Washington we should talk to, or, whatever it may be, your listeners, there may be somebody out there with a connection that we should meet, we should talk, to see if they can help in the advocacy work. I'll give an example. A year and a half ago, I met a doctor, a neurosurgeon, and she was taken by my story, right? She's a neurosurgeon, so she was fascinated about what happened to me and So we're talking a lot about my story. And I ultimately pivoted and I'm like, but I started this nonprofit Falling Forward, and I'm telling her about Falling Forward. And a light bulb went on for her over coffee. First meeting with her, we're having a coffee. Light bulb goes on and she goes, you need to talk to the AMA, American Medical Association, right? And I heard those words come out of her mouth and I'm like, what? What do you mean me go talk to the AMA? Well, long story short, she was right. She opened the door to the AMA. 6 months later, I was on stage at AMA. And 6 months after that, the AMA passed a resolution against the issue of therapy caps, right? So we have a new partner. We have a new partner in the
That's
AMA.
a powerful partner, too. That's a powerful partner.
And just full disclosure, Falling Forward is still teeny tiny, right? But the AMA is not. The AMA is big, right? And they have muscle and they have, clout, right? So because of this one doctor that I met over coffee, who she had the insight of, oh, you need to go talk to the AMA, right? I meet one person, she opens a door, and suddenly we have this big new partner helping in this fight called AMA. So anybody in your audience, right? You may be the next person that, knows the next person we need to go talk to, right? So I'm all ears.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for being on this really special episode of CareLab for Podcastathon today. Y'all, if you want to donate, and I hope that you do after hearing these really powerful stories, if you want to donate to Falling Forward, the link to that is going to be in the show notes, whether you're watching this on YouTube or you're listening to this, wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to go click on that link. Donate whatever you can. A little goes a long way if we all do it together, right? And then the other thing that I want y'all to keep in your mind as you're listening to this, as you're going and donating, is think about how the power of the connections that Sam's been talking about today are capable of making change in whatever it is. And when we talk to each other, when we connect with each other, when we understand what humans look like face to face, as opposed to just numbers or statistics or stories, we have the power to do really, really good things in the world. And we can all take that and drive it forward every day in everything that we do. If you've made it to the end of this episode, please make sure to like, subscribe, follow, check out another episode, download a couple, leave a comment, tell us what you would like to hear about, because we want to be responsive to the needs and concerns of our listeners here on CareLab. Sam, thank you again for being on this really wonderful episode today. I cannot tell you how much we enjoyed it. We'll see y'all again right here back on CareLab.
Thank you both so much. And thank you to your audience.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.